Oh, so early. Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukie Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the city website at www.milwaukieoregon.gov. You may locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is posted. If you have not reviewed the agenda, please do so. It contains important information about the process. One moment. The City of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. Let's please take a moment to acknowledge their history. On to the minutes. There are no commission minutes for consideration this evening. Informational items. Are there informational items from staff?
I just had one item, Chair. I just wanted to introduce to the commission Matthew Ellis. He's our new associate planner as of, I think, a month and a half now, almost 2 months, yes. So I just wanted to introduce you all. You will be seeing him in a couple of months on another code amendment project, but I wanted you to meet him, and he wanted to come meet you all and see how all of this works here. So
thank you for joining. All right. This is now an opportunity to comment on items not on tonight's agenda. Does any audience member wish to comment on an item that is not on tonight's commission agenda? Is there anyone virtual?
there is not, no.
All right. The next item is a Type 2 conditional use application for a martial arts training facility located in the Business Industrial District. This is file number CU 2026-001. The Type 3 application for 5484 Southeast International Way is called to order. The applicant has the burden of proving that the application is consistent with the city zoning ordinance, comprehensive plan, and any applicable municipal code provision, and that the proposal conforms with the applicable criteria. I now ask staff to cite the zoning ordinance sections or section where the criteria can be found.
Yeah, the applicable sections are section 19.310, business industrial zone, section 19.905, conditional uses, and section 19.1006, type 3 review.
Thank you. All testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria. Failure to address a criterion or raise an issue with sufficient detail to allow the Planning Commission an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue precludes appeal to the City Council based on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow a response precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party with standing may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission to the City Council. Persons with standing are those who submit comments or testify. If additional documents or evidence are provided by any party, the Commission may, if requested, allow a continuance or leave the record open to allow the parties to a responsible opportunity to respond. Any such continuance or extension shall be subject to the limitations of the 120-day rule unless the continuance or extension is requested or agreed to by the applicant. Does any member of the Commission wish to abstain from this hearing? Does any member of the Commission wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest? Does any member of the Commission wish to report on any ex parte contacts? Will any commissioner who has visited the site prior to this hearing please raise their hand? Did any commissioners who visited the site speak to anyone or at the site or note anything different from what is indicated in the staff report for this application? Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the participation of any member of the Planning Commission? Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter? All right, let's proceed to the staff report.
All right, while we're opening up the staff report, I'll just say good evening, Commissioners. I'm Brett Kelver, Senior Planner with the city. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, and I think there's at least one Commissioner I haven't met before. Commissioner Steer, nice to meet you. So I'll just be walking you through this Type 3 conditional use application tonight. I feel like it's pretty straightforward, and I hope you had a chance to review the staff report. I think the applicants did a really nice job putting their application together as well. So just to set the stage, the site is one of the properties kind of in the southern, what I think of the southern portion of the business industrial or BI zone. It's a fairly large site itself. It's about 7 acres, and it's developed with, I believe, kind of 5 distinct buildings that have a bunch of joined together tenant spaces. All in all, it seems like there are at least a dozen different tenant spaces, and the space in question is at this 5484 tenant space. It's actually on the 2nd floor above a 1st floor space that's used by an electronics company. So it's a fully developed site. It's got a lot of off-street parking, landscaping, and the proposal we're talking about tonight is really just kind of moving into a space. So there are no exterior changes proposed. Like I said, the zoning for it is business industrial or BI. It's kind of our light industrial type zone, and it allows a range of uses that are permitted outright. And I addressed some of this in the staff report, tried to give a little bit of an example about the kind of the hierarchy of the arrangement of uses that are allowed. So again, there are some outright permitted uses. The idea is to allow for kind of a mix of some manufacturing, some commercial, business headquarters types of uses. And then along with those, there are some what are considered accessory uses. So it may be that if, for example, at a corporate headquarters, there may be a gym that's there for use of the employees, or a cafeteria, or some facilities like that that are kind of incidental to the main use and part of it. Then there are some identified limited uses, which are there to serve kind of employees of the district. And some examples would be just maybe a simple coffee shop, cafe, barber shop, those kinds of things. And they are allowed outright, but true to their name, they're limited in nature. The idea is they should only take up kind of no more than a quarter of a particular building area, or 4,000 square feet. And then finally, there's a short list of some uses that are allowed with conditional approval, like we are here tonight. Those include indoor recreation, mini storage, those kinds of things. So again, the idea is to provide a lot of space in that area for kind of these light industrial intended uses, but to recognize that it's okay to have a mix in there. On this particular site, there is a natural resource overlay. There's kind of part of that, the stream that runs throughout the BI zone connected to the Minthorn wetland. It runs kind of more or less under and kind of through the parking area. And again, as I mentioned, the proposal doesn't have any exterior changes proposed. So although there is this overlay, it's not really germane to this presentation. So for the proposal itself, again, like I said, I thought the applicants did a really nice job packaging and explaining kind of what they're doing and addressing the criteria. And they're going to have a chance to make their own presentation and can answer more of your detailed questions about it. And I know that for the purpose of the title slide and just kind of easy reference to this, I've been referring to it as a martial arts training facility. And I'm not sure that that's really a complete description of it. And I think, again, they can speak a little bit more to that, because I think, as they explained in their materials, I think that it's really kind of like an educational and training facility. And I think martial arts is kind of what runs through it, but they can talk to you a little bit more about the overall approach. But it is one thing that it is not like a regular kind of open gym, like a 24-hour fitness or Planet Fitness. It's, very structured, scheduled, kind of, there's no unsupervised sessions there. And group classes, they've kind of indicated the maximum range of students or participants that they have on site. And although they list a fairly wide range of operating hours, again, that's within a very scheduled context. So with that in mind, and given the way the site's developed, it seems like a very appropriate proposal. And so with that, again, as was covered in the staff report and lined out in the findings, for conditional uses in the BI zone, there are actually kind of two separate but related and somewhat overlapping criteria. The conditional use approval criteria in section 19.905 have this list of 7 that mostly focus on looking at suitability, compatibility of the use with the surrounding area, and trying to identify any impacts that might need to be mitigated, as well as just general consistency with our comp plan goals. And in this respect, I think some of the points that stuck out to me are just it's a reuse of a space that in fact has quite a long history. This tenant space has been used for martial arts instruction quite a bit over the last couple decades. It is a multi-tenant site, so there's already kind of an expectation that there'll be a lot of different kinds of uses, related or not there. And in terms of impacts, I didn't really identify any that would seem kind of out of the ordinary for a use like this going in. I mean, the activities are going to be conducted indoors, and it's pretty internal focused activity. And there, like I said, there's although we no longer really regulate parking or have parking standards, there's very ample parking available to all the tenancies on the site. And with respect to the comprehensive plan policies, I think it seems like it's addressing and hitting on a number of those, and both the applicant's materials and the findings address that as well. The other section of approval criteria are found in the BI zone section itself. It's a shorter list, but it has a lot of similarity to the general ones there, just looking at adverse impacts, compatibility, and adequate access. And so with all that in mind, the staff's recommendation was for approval, and we didn't really even identify any conditions of approval to recommend. So with that in mind, I think I would just say, kind of as part of the general type 3 options for you, we've presented the findings in support of approval for this. And so one option is to approve those. If you feel through your discussion that you need some modification to the findings, or in fact, if you can think of some conditions that might be appropriate, we would just need to read those into the record and make sure we capture them. If for some reason you think you need more time, continuing the hearing is an option. The 120-day deadline is not until May, but again, I think it's pretty straightforward, but that is an option for you. Or finally, you could deny the application if you feel like you can make sufficient findings for that. So with that in mind, I'd wrap it up and ask if you have any questions.
Are there any clarifying questions for staff? Thank you very much for that, Brett. I appreciate that overview. Have we received any correspondence in this matter other than those included in the meeting packet?
We have not.
All right. Would the applicant or their representative like to comment?
Yeah, we'll pull that up for you. Give us just a second.
Just short little video clip. My name is John Butler, and this is Christine Beach. She's going to be the director of operations and training. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. We just want to give you just a kind of a short presentation about kind of the 5 W's of why we're doing this academy, the area, and the educational training facility. So if we can bring up that presentation, I'll just go through this. I don't want to expend too much of their time. I know they're all busy people. This is about 13 slides that we'll do, so if we can get that in presentation mode. Unfortunately, your system will not work with the audio for some reason, but that's okay. We'll make this work. So if we can go back to the very first slide. That's okay. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's doing that. You might have to go out of it and then come back in and go into slide mode, which would be down the top, bottom right. Right there. If you click on that, it should work. Should come open. Did not come open? Okay. If not, I'll get my glasses. Yeah, it should go, if you go into presentation mode, it should open up. Well, Lite, you just click on one slide at a time. Okay, so you just click on the first slide. There you go. So anyway, this is our logo and the place to train. The goal is to create a place location that we can train multiple martial arts and also an educational facility for that at one location, which is kind of unique. I've been in the martial arts industry for about 50 years. I'm almost 70 years old. And it's not what I've done for a while. I've been doing other things, but I'll explain a little bit more of the reason why we're doing this. Next slide, if we can go to that one. There we go. So just a little bit about the history of the ownership of the location. I know that Brett and his staff did that too for you, and you saw some of that, but developed about 1980. It was Omart Business Center that built it in 1979. It's a pretty significant complex there. A lot of different people there. It was built by John Rupp, who passed away several years ago. I actually know his son-in-law pretty well. It was owned by Southwest Industrial, or it's currently owned by Southwest Industrial Land Development, LLC, which is a conglomerate of the family members. It's basically like a trust, if you will. In the history, it's been operated as a training center since about 2007. It's always been a martial arts training center. That's where people have always trained there. It went through a gentleman named Lynn Schoenfeld, who ran for sheriff here in Clackamas County at one point in time. He's the one that really built the place initially. It was taken over by Black Wolf, which was a large kind of security conglomerate in the local area. You may have heard of them before. They're no longer there. And somebody came to me and said, hey, we'd like to do something with this center. It's a waste. There was a lot of money put into it. And I'm a business owner. I have multiple businesses in the state of Washington. And I said, yeah, let's do that. Let's look at it. And so we looked at it, and that's how we came about putting this proposal together. Next slide. Kind of an overview for the rules of development that you have, and what's the really main thing there is there's a location there called Unbroken Fitness, which is really a CrossFit type of gym, if you're familiar with CrossFit, that's there. So what happened was it kind of went from the martial arts school to an adjacent building that was next door. And so one of the big questions I would obviously have if I was sitting in your seat was is there going to be any conflict? Well, there's actually martial arts going on within that facility right now because there's another school from Southeast Portland doesn't have any place to go, and they're going to combine with our location, actually be our students. And so there's no conflict with them. We're doing something totally different than they're doing in Unbroken Fitness, so it's not conflicting with other business owners in the area. The next slide. What we're going to do at the site, again, in martial arts training, we're going to do some leadership training. We're going to do for law enforcement in the local areas. There's actually already a couple of departments that have in the local area that want to do training there with us. We're also going to do a lot of structured community workshops, and I'll talk about that real quick in a second. We're going to have scheduled classes, so it's not just going to be people coming in like they would for 24-hour fitness or LA Fitness. And we've looked at the parking in the area too, which I think Brett addressed and his team addressed, and it's not going to have a conflict. Usually that parking lot, to be quite honest with you, is just empty. There's nobody there. I've been there multiple times, different times of the day over the last 10 or 15 years. There's not that many people there. So it's pretty good. It's really, we consider ourselves a form of indoor recreation, education for the community, both for adults and for the youth. Next slide. The transition to the place to train from what it's been done and what's been used for in the past. So short term is the martial arts, the educational side of it, if you will, and a local and regional place for law enforcement and private security to train. One of the things we really work on a lot in what we do, I also own a pretty large private security company that works in the state of Washington. We do executive protection, we do port security. We put armed people on ships that come, transnational ships that come in and protect them. And so there's a big security need for that. But one of the focuses we have is on conflict resolution, and that's one of the things that we bring into this too for the local area, for law enforcement agencies and for private security companies, which is a big industry right now across the United States, as you've seen in the news. Midterm, what do we want to do? Incorporation of situational awareness technology. There's a system called Milo. If you've ever seen a movie called Matrix, and the person goes into the room and they're fighting with all different kinds of people, but it's actually all virtual. That's what Milo is. It's a very unique system that I've done a lot of training with and for. The military uses it, law enforcement uses it across the United States. It helps limit the contact and use of force by police officers and security officers. So I want to bring one of those systems, hopefully, later on midterm into that facility, into that site for the local agencies to use and for private security to use. Long term, we'd like to expand, do an expansion at one point in time to become really an organ training center for human trafficking mitigation. That's the reason is because what we're started this business and all my other businesses is 100% of all profits go into my nonprofit, Silent Bridge. So we do work in 10 different countries. I have facilities in 5 different countries with over 500 girls that we rescued from sex trafficking overseas. I have 79 full-time staff that work overseas for me to help me rescue those girls, and they take care of them 24/7. Next slide. How does it benefit the community? It's really promoting health and fitness. And then the second thing, of course, is building discipline and confidence. Anybody that's taken martial arts before, it really helps. We use it in the facilities overseas, our safe havens overseas for the girls. They go to martial arts 5 days a week because their confidence has been broken because of the environment they were in. So, so that's one of the things that we do overseas too. Next slide. It also creates a constant awareness of human trafficking in our midst, that it's around us all the time, because our website that's been developed now, Christine's the one that put that together along with a lot of other things. It shows that 100% of all profits go to Silent Bridge. All my businesses do. And number one. Number two is that every time somebody comes into the facility, they see that. They see what we're doing. They see there's going to be a video playing about the things that we do overseas. And everybody will be aware of that. And we also, long-term, we want to run community workshops there to help bring the awareness up for that. The fourth thing it does is fostering social connections, because as we all know, as people bringing all different types of people from the community together for these classes is very helpful, because it'd be people that don't often see each other. The last but not least is it empowers youth and families by bringing them together and involved. A lot of times in these schools, and the ones that I've had before, is you have mothers and fathers taking the classes with their daughters or their sons, and it's very helpful in empowering the community. Next slide. In the team background, myself, again, I'm the CEO of Learn International, Full Mission Profile, a bunch of other companies that I won't get into, but, and then Chad Kaiser, who is going to be the senior coach at the facility in the academy. He is actually a detective for Clackamas County Sheriff's Office and an instructor for law enforcement around the state. And he's also a very high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner. He was the no-gi champion in the world for several years. And then obviously Christine Beach will be the director of training and operations. She is one of the better project managers I've ever had. We have at least 12 coaches, and we have 10 advisors, which are our board from Silent Bridge. And those advisors are pretty phenomenal people that are business owners from around the country, several of them out of Washington, D.C. We have over 100 years of combined business development experience between myself and the people that are on the board. We have over 260 years of combined martial arts experience in training people around the country and internationally. And we have over 200 years of combined law enforcement training experience at city, county, state, and federal level too. Next slide. This is some of the team. Probably, obviously, Christine and Chad are in the picture on the far left and the far right. And then a lot of the people that are going to be instructors there. You see, it's a good combination of a variety of people from the community. That's kind of, a lot of those people are kind of the who's who of the martial arts community of the Portland metropolitan area. Next slide. Who's Silent Bridge? Again, founded Silent Bridge only 6 years ago. And I said we got 79 people full-time overseas, over 500 girls that are rescued. We have safe havens in Bangladesh, Nepal, Belize, Honduras, Ukraine. When the war started in Ukraine, we built one there to interrupt the trafficking that was being taken place by the Russian mafia. We've also got new safe havens that are developing right now in Sri Lanka and in Thailand and in Ghana, and the list goes on and on. Next slide. We negotiate soft rescues. Sometimes we do hard rescues, but we try to do soft rescues around the country, and that's where all this money is going, is from that. And we provide secure housing 24/7 for all of the girls. We do have boys in one of our safe havens in Honduras, and we're gonna have boys in our safe haven in Thailand too. Medical and dental care. We do education, vocational training, trauma recovery and reintegration support. And some of these girls, because of the damage they've had, I'll be taking care of them the rest of their life. And this facility is gonna be part of the continuity plan of my will to take care of these girls even after I'm gone. Next slide. We're almost done, sorry. Again, those are the countries we operate in. I talked about that already. And next slide. An example of a rescue on the left, about 5 days after it happened. Usually the girls don't see me initially during the rescue because of the time that it is. On the right was just a couple months ago. That is one floor of one safe haven. That's a 7-floor facility. That's about how many girls are on each floor. I know some of those girls came out of pedophile brothels, and you see people go, they look so little. They came out of pedophile brothels. Their youngest one I've ever gotten was 3 years old. Next slide. If you can play that, I understand the sound doesn't work, but I can talk people through it a little bit. And if it'll play, bottom left. Yeah, so this is the safe haven in Nepal, and this is the end of the presentation. I apologize for the video, the audio not playing. This is at 15,000 feet elevation where we built this safe haven. That's the safe haven, the first one. We have 2 there now. These are the girls on their way to school. I have a staff member on the front and the back of them to get them there safely without anybody bothering them. So it's, again, 17,000 feet. They walk down to about 15,500 feet to go to school. So about 6,000 feet taller than the top of Mount Hood. We do community outreach programs to make the community aware of the traffickers that move in and out of the area. The safe haven is on one of the largest human trafficking trails in the world. It goes into China for organ harvesting and goes into India to the main brothels in Mumbai. These are some of our facilities there where we run the classes. These are some of our staff teaching both the local communities and children. These are actually some of our children that we've rescued. This is inside of one of our facilities in Nepal. And that's where, again, where all this money goes. Now you see these are teachers. We hire teachers in the villages where the traffickers move through. So they become our eyes and ears to identify the traffickers and girls that are in movement so we can interdict them before they get to the borders. These are, again, some of our children that are in our programs. We have one school, we have 361 students in Nepal that runs 1st through 12th grade. It's a location where no other kids could not go to school because there's nothing there in that area. That young lady right there, when we rescued her, she was 13 years old and she was pregnant when we got her, and she had the baby in the safe haven. So that's just a little bit of what we do. And if you have any questions about why we're doing this, what we're going to do, how we're going to run it. We're happy to answer that too.
Thank you very much for that testimony. I appreciate you speaking about your, your experience and what your goals are. It's really helpful to hear that from you.
Sure.
Do any commissioners have any questions for the applicants?
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brett. And thanks to Brett and the staff for did a great job. Thank you.
Okay. To follow on that, is there anyone present, either in person or online, who would like to provide testimony either in favor or against or neutral?
Wait, sorry, so they're gonna deliberate. They haven't made a decision yet. Yeah, sorry. I didn't explain. Okay, all right.
Sorry about that.
All right. Are there any representatives from the neighborhood district associations here to testify? Okay. Let's see. There's no public testimony. Do any commissioners have any questions for the speakers? Okay. Does any member of the planning commission have any questions regarding anything at this point?
I had a quick clarifying question for staff. So it was kind of mentioned that there was the de facto community use for unbroken strength, which transferred to an adjacent site when things moved. I was kind of wondering if the conditional use is kind of approved here, not that they're going to be changing their practice, but what would happen if and when a use were to change? Would it go away if we granted the conditional use today for their business and you're wildly successful and you need a bigger space and you move? What happens to the conditional use kind of at the site that we're kind of talking about?
Yeah, I think Vera maybe can correct me on this because I don't have the code section right in front of me, but I think that section 905 of the code does address how conditional uses can be continued or ended. And in a case like this, I think that if this facility were to close and move somewhere else, I can't remember if the code says there's a clock ticking or if, so that if that's kind of what happened with, like you said, how we got here with the Krav Maga studio being in the space, ceasing operation, but not for a very long time before the Black Wolf Academy came in. So I suppose it's conceivable that if a similar kind of operation came in within a certain time period after they were to leave the space, they could kind of pick up that conditional use and continue it. But there would be a clock that would start ticking. And I think kind of adjacent to maybe what you were asking, one thing I was thinking I would volunteer anyway would be that, because there was in the presentation kind of a mention of kind of midterm and long-term goals. And the code also has provisions for addressing modifications to conditional uses. So depending on what's proposed over time, we could evaluate it and decide whether there's any kind of official modification needed, if there's a minor review that could be handled administratively, or if the changes were significant enough that it needed to come back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration of some of the same issues.
Maybe just kind of following, if they were successful and grew and wanted to physically grow to one of the adjacent buildings, would that be handled through a modification, or would that be a whole new conditional use for that new site? The address would be one digit different.
There might be a little technicality to that. I mean, some of it might depend on the specifics of the proposal, but I think at least tonight, my thought on that would be if it's the same operation, simply expanding, maybe they're moving into the first floor as well as the second floor, or maybe they're saying, oh, actually across the way on the same site, there's a much bigger space we could move into. I feel like I would be inclined to handle that as a major, but probably a major modification to that existing conditional use. So it would come back to you with a new file number, but it would reference this original one. And I guess I'm not sure that one of the requirements is to record a conditional use permit that we'll draft up if this is approved. And I don't know that I guess maybe depending on how significant the modifications were, we might have a re-recording of revised permit. I think we probably would just kind of reflect the change, but probably a modification. And if it was the kind of expansion you're talking about, I would imagine probably be a major one that would come back to you. Yeah.
Okay. If there isn't any additional testimony, the public testimony portion of the hearing on the request to establish a new conditional use permit at 5484 Southeast International Way, file number CU 2026001 is now closed. Is the commission ready for discussion? I'd like to offer it to you, Vice Chair, if you'd like to begin.
All right. First of all, thank you very much to staff for your presentation, and thank you as well to the applicant. Your application is very well presented, and I feel like makes for a very easy decision. This proposal is very clearly put together. I don't think it will disrupt any of the current uses of the space. And I think that is further attested to by the previous conditional use of the other martial arts facility, the Krav Maga, Black Wolf that's been in that space. That has not hindered the use of any of the other facilities in the area, which for me makes this a very easy application to consider moving forward with approval for. Yeah, pretty quick and easy for me.
If I may, I think I agree with you, Vice Chair. I think in looking through the conditional uses, not seeing any kind of adverse impacts, it seems appropriate. Seems very much so compatible with kind of the character and scale of some of the other uses. There's no vehicular or pedestrian access issues. And I think we heard through kind of some of the testimony tonight that, providing a needed service kind of in the district as training facility. And so as I kind of look through this, I'm not seeing any issues. And I think as staff have kind of clearly articulated, I think it meets all the criteria, and I'm ready to move forward with this.
I'll go ahead and chime in also. I agree with both Chair and Vice Chair on this, that it is a pretty clear and straightforward just reassumption of what conditional use had already been used in the unit. So I think that there really isn't any further need for debate over it. It's pretty straightforward.
Thank you, staff, and John and Christine for the preparation that you put into this. Makes the decision quite easy. As it's been stated already, it falls within the criteria here. I think it's a great use to complement the businesses that are already there, and offers something for employees of neighboring businesses to go and do before, during, after work when they can find a break. And yeah, I'm always a proponent of some sort of recreational activity that people can get in their lives. So that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to, thank you, Brett, for the presentation, and thank you guys for coming and presenting tonight. I mean, really, really impressive what you guys do, the Silent Bridge and all of that. But relating to this, as far as demonstrating compliance with the code sections, I think that this certainly checks that box. Yeah, as far as the history of this facility, having a past of similar uses, I don't see any issues with this. The code sections are met. I mean, as far as the criteria, and even with the comprehensive plan, the couple of sections in the plan, a comprehensive plan that this relates to, I think are checked too. So, yeah, just thank you again, and great work. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you all for your deliberation. I appreciate that. I'm just also going to chime in and add in that I appreciate the presentation from city staff. I appreciate you, the applicants, being here and sharing your story. I also think this is an exceptionally well put together application. They don't usually, tick it all off so clearly, so I really appreciate that. I also want to state that I think that this is a really good use, continued use for the area, for the, the recreational benefits, the benefits to physical activity, I think are numerous. I appreciate, having eyes on the area, perhaps hours before or after other commercial activities are going on. It helps, it's more multifaceted use of the space. It's nice to see eyes out there. Also, I feel that, it meets the criteria for a conditional use permit in a business industrial zone. There's currently, a decent amount of vacancy within the greater industrial complex, not necessarily the one you're in, but within the greater area. So I don't have any concerns with, pressures from other businesses needing the space. And it's, I really don't see any adverse impacts. So really appreciate your time. And if there's no further discussion, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve file CU-2026-001.
I'll second.
Vera, can you please help us with a roll call?
Well, Commissioner Steer,
I agree.
Commissioner Sherman,
I agree as well, and I'd also like to thank you for the work that you're doing internationally. It's very impactful.
Commissioner Lowther,
Aye.
Commissioner Hess,
Aye.
Vice Chair Pennick,
Aye.
and Chair Graytrick.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right, the application for CU, thank you.
Thank you.
You as well.
Thank you. The application for CU 2026-001 is approved. If anyone wishes to appeal the commission's decision to the city council, you must make an application stating the grounds for your appeal within 15 days of the mailing of the notice of decision. Please see planning staff for details. All right, so next we will move on to our work session item, which is our policy Lite code amendments. This work session item is a package of proposed amendments to the Milwaukie Municipal Code. Senior Planner Ryan Dyer will present the information for us.
Hello, everyone. While we're waiting for the presentation to get pulled up, I just wanted to give a little context or background on this set of amendments. So a few months ago, I think Vera brought to you all a set of what we affectionately call our housekeeping amendments that are basically a set of sort of non-substantive code changes to clean up areas of the code where there's been a mistake or there's just a lack of clarity. And so we try to do that annually. We also, the way we sort of think about this is we have a couple of other sort of sets of code amendments. So we've got major code efforts. So that looks like when we consolidated our high density residential zone back in 2023. So sort of, focused, often, but not always. We might bring on a consultant to help with the project, but we're really looking at sort of like one oftentimes large code section, and it's considered a pretty heavy lift. Like we're going to sort of majorly overhaul the way that we are regulating something in the city. And then we also have this set of, again, what we refer to affectionately as policy Lite items. They're not quite housekeeping. They do have sort of many times policy implications, but they don't quite warrant. They're usually sort of like discrete code sections. They don't really warrant, bringing on a consultant, but they do warrant discussion. And so we've tried to group, we collect them over time through conversations with, applicants, internal conversations that we have as staff, just in reviewing development proposals. We gather them up and then we have grouped them here for you tonight. And I've tried to present them in a way that is somewhat grouped by topic area to provide a little bit of context for, this is a sort of a set of items that are, again, while, should be taken on their own terms, are sort of talking about similar ideas. So hopefully that is making this a little bit easier because it can feel, I think internally, even though we talk about these things all day, every day, it can feel, like a little whiplash to sort of move from topic to topic. So I say that to also say, if we're getting, really jargony, or you're feeling lost, please feel free to interrupt me. That's true most times that we're meeting, but also, especially during a work session, that's what this is set up for, is so that you can stop, ask questions, and really understand the items that we're talking about. I'll also say that you might see there have been a couple of sort of housekeeping style amendments that have worked their way into this set of code amendments. As you might imagine, those are, I feel like, the most frequent items that we identify as, I just wish there was a comment there, or I just wish we said this way instead of this other way. So yeah, we'll probably move through those pretty quickly. But yeah, with that, I guess we'll really just sort of dive into them on a sort of issue by issue basis. So starting with table 1, topic 1, this is a set of sort of, these items have been grouped together by, they're all sort of design or development standard fixes. And so just to remind everybody, development standards are really sort of numerical based, sort of site standards that are, apply in a base zone. So our moderate density residential zone, or our high density residential zone, or our downtown mixed use zone. Each of those base zones have development standards. They're things like that they govern, development on the site. Things like building setbacks, maximum lot coverage, building heights, limitations, all these dimensional regulations. This table also includes changes to design standards. Those are typically more qualitative in nature. Standards that regulate building orientation, facade articulation, the percentage of a building face that needs to be sort of transparent, openings, windows and doors, and then materials. So I think if you start to push on either one of these, it starts to blur a little bit. What is a development standard and a design standard, and sort of the distinction that I'm making here. But I think broadly speaking, this holds true for these two sort of categories. Next slide, please. All right, let's dive in. So the first item, so item 1.1, is about ADUs. So that's accessory dwelling units. These are sort of subsidiary to or accessory to, they're full-on dwelling units, but accessory to a primary dwelling unit on a property. So we allow these in our moderate density residential zone or high density residential zone, and they can be either attached or detached. And we have different regulations for whether or not they're attached or detached. So here we're talking about attached ADUs, so attached to the primary dwelling. And the problem, there were sort of two sets of issues that we identified here. One is just sort of a older way of thinking about ADUs. So we've allowed ADUs in the city for, I don't know, 20 years, yeah. And we, when we initially developed the regulations for ADUs, I think this was what felt like a new housing type for the community, and there was a lot of emphasis placed on sort of having those units blend in a way that was, and not just blend in, but sort of be discreet, almost invisible to the casual, walker by. The regulatory environment for housing has changed since that time. And we now, some of that change was a product of, the city taking initiatives to allow more housing types, and some of that was related to House Bill 2001, also known as the sort of middle housing bill in Oregon, which legalized on lots formerly zoned exclusively for single detached dwellings, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and cottage cluster styles of development. And so when we looked at the attached ADU standards, they were really sort of still geared towards this idea that they should not be visible to anybody. There shouldn't be a second entrance on the street-facing facade. We shouldn't have stairs or porches on the street-facing facade. They should not be visible to people, and this just felt at odds with the current regulatory environment. And so the proposal here would be to strike those requirements for attached ADUs, so you could have a second entrance on an attached ADU, and also to strike the sort of the front porch prohibitions as well. And then, so that's one sort of topic. I guess I'll pause here and just see if there are any questions from folks. That one feels pretty straightforward. Okay. Yeah.
Should we save comments till the end, or do we want to do it as a working session throughout?
There isn't a deliberation period, so yeah, that's a good question. Should we be posing questions throughout or waiting till the end?
I think it might feel, you might lose track of questions. I would lose track of questions, because I would speak for myself that I maybe had if I were going through this without interrupting me. So I'm comfortable if you want to ask questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and this isn't a comment on the change, but what's actually maintaining and proposed to stay in here for this, what looks like the third, which is now B1, the proposal for the attached ADU that would increase floor area is subject to the following design standard. And that's to match the existing or the new construction with the existing primary structure.
Yeah.
My thought there is that, it's quite common from an architecture perspective to change the exterior finish of buildings to reduce differentiate the massing and look there. I would offer maybe we should consider something complementary instead of saying that it has to match one-to-one. I don't know if you're looking for this kind of feedback right now, or if that's appropriate at this time, but.
I think this is exactly, the type of feedback that we're looking for. Yeah, and I think our thought on these was, trying, I guess, maybe not to let go of everything, that's still having some standards, but I think I can definitely see a point that, like you're saying, that you might want to differentiate between the two units as well, and that it can be done in a tasteful way. I don't know, just from I guess as we talk about housing internally, regulations, we're also always thinking about clear and objective standards, which is just sort of state requirements that, any standards that jurisdictions impose on residential development, they need to be clear and objective. One might argue that about the clarity and objectivity of these standards that we have. You could have more than one trim type, for example, on a dwelling unit, and then which one of these are we looking at for consistency with the addition? But sort of a consistency language. I'm just thinking out loud here as well. But I think I note the intent and appreciate it, and will give some thought to how we might be able to appreciate that you could still have a differentiated dwelling that still, is aesthetically pleasing.
My thought with that is like matching the existing material quality and trying to add some consistency there. It's definitely objective. What complementary means, because there's different tastes and opinions across different folks. But
I might take Commissioner Hess's point a step further and even suggest maybe this should entirely be deleted, right? So rather than struggle over what complementary language is or this or that, you know, when someone's going to go to the expense of spending $200,000 to $300,000 to $400,000 to do something, I imagine it'll be done some generally tastefully. And so, you know, what it actually looks like, I mean, how much do we need to get into that? So that's kind of maybe a little bit of my own perspective. I really appreciate you kind of raising this topic. I also had kind of a question, and I'm totally fine with deleting the hidden from public view. I also wanted to just suggest anywhere else in code that we have this seen from public view. I think when I was reading the materials, it's quantified 50 feet from the right of way. We shouldn't be saying seen from public view or hidden from public view. We should be saying 50 feet from the right of way, because it's just kind of misleading. And so like, let's call it what the standard actually is, as opposed to just kind of a little bit of a misnomer. So that's my comment.
Appreciate that.
Do we have that defined somewhere, like a legal definition? I mean, then we're not having to.
When we, the applicability of the design standards, for example, for single units through plexes it's the facade that's within 50 feet of the front property line is sort of how we talk about it. So we don't talk about it being viewable. We just say its proximity to the public right of way or to that front property line. So that's the way we define it, not sort of which angle am I standing on and I can see something. That's exactly what we try to get away from.
Okay.
So yeah,
that's
it's
great. It is defined clearly.
That's how we apply it. But I think there may be places in the code where we still have remnants of the visible from somewhere kind of thing, and we can do sort of a find and destroy sort of thing within the code and see if we can make that more mathematical. So we can do that. Yeah.
I like the idea of find and destroy. A couple of just follow-up notes on that. I think one, there are a different residential development types are regulated under different sections of the code. The 50-foot standard is specifically for development, like 1 to 4 unit development. It would not cover, that exemption does not cover ADUs currently. I believe that the applicability language for ADUs currently, and these design standards specifically, is just talking about any street-facing facade. And so for ADUs, the code right now does not care how far you are from the street property line. It just cares what is the orientation, is it facing the street? But I think we could, because we will get to that exemption later in the discussion, I think that could be an exemption that applies for ADUs as well. I just believe right now it does not.
Circling back to the design standards on ADUs and the idea of potentially, deleting them outright. Potentially, I might be getting ahead of myself here, but if we have street-facing ADUs, would that street-facing facade be beholden to the same design standards as the primary unit in terms of articulation and glazing and design features?
Yes, which actually is a good segue into the second item on this list.
Okay.
Which I don't want to, if there are other questions on this topic, we don't have to move on yet, but the answer is yes, and that is the second item, is basically the code as currently written doesn't reference how, like in the ADU subsection itself, it does not tell the reader how it should be thinking about how the modifications to the dwelling itself, the primary dwelling, how we should be reviewing those changes for consistency against the design standards for 1 to 4 unit development. One could argue that it is safe to assume that we have a sort of overarching non-conforming clause in the zoning code in 19800 that states that, where a development is conforming, you shouldn't make changes without a variance to make it non-conforming, or where it's currently non-conforming, you shouldn't make changes that would increase the non-conformity. It's reasonable to assume that that would apply for ADUs as well, but there's just not a lot of clarity in the ADU section itself, and we do provide that clarity in other sections of the code when you're doing sort of residential, conversions to add additional dwelling units, for example. We sort of explicitly state that you shouldn't be bringing the structure out of conformance with these standards that apply to, that applied to the unit before. Basically. So this, the second sort of recommendation here is to, basically just add the language that explicitly points to 19505, which again is that 1 to 4 unit design standards subsection, and say, when you are adding an attached ADU, we're just going to be reviewing that the whole street-facing facade of that structure for conformance with the design standards in 19505. So it's not, again, this is not necessarily one of those, this isn't really a policy change so much as it is just adding, it's more of a housekeeping amendment to add clarity to the code that, we're still going to be looking for your, that you're not removing all the windows on the front of the house. So does that answer your question? And any other follow-up questions on that specific proposal?
I believe it answers my question, and I want to know other commissioners' opinions on whether or not we feel the applicability of the design standards on to the ADUs feels like coverage enough in terms of design features.
My opinion would be that it likely does. Overall, if you have those same requirements to the facade that you're going to have, regardless of whether or not there's entrances into 2 units, it's still a facade. So I think that covers a lot of concerns I could have there. I too think there's a lot of ambiguity about saying compatible, that can be, there's some gray area there. I do want to just throw out the caveat as the historian in the room that, if there was a historic property that they wanted to do this same kind of work to, they have different standards they'd have to look at, where continuity and conformity have their own definitions and are very well defined for individual resources. In this situation, as been stated, and I agree with you, Commissioner Hess, like if someone's going to invest the finances into this sort of activity, they should have the ability to upgrade, the cladding across the entire facade. They shouldn't have to maintain vinyl on an addition. If they want to do hardy board across both, that's actually preferred. So I think that, there's, what we don't want to see is, perhaps an addition where you have, vinyl and then some T111 and then hardy board. You want to maybe kind of avoid the juxtaposition that becomes incongruous, but you don't necessarily need to be requiring, similar materials on what's going to be added if there's an opportunity to upgrade overall. So I'm definitely open to seeing language where that would be refined.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Any other questions?
Just wanted to add one note to this. This actually isn't a question, but I just want to put it out there for the record. I think that the world is changing in terms of, ADUs being bad. And I think that it's wonderful that we're considering these options, this middle housing. And also, I just want to acknowledge that I think this also helps support ADA standards and requirements, because telling someone where they cannot put an entrance limits the accessibility of that property and could require a, paving of a new path around to a different elevation, thus extending the path that person has to take just to get inside the building for what seems to be no real good reason. So I think there's a lot of potential benefits.
That's a good point. Okay. We can skip over my cool little picture. So moving on to item 1.2, just pointing out that we have this category of structures in the code called residential accessory structures. In other words, these are sheds, detached garages, structures that you would find on a residential property that are not the dwelling unit itself. And we, for some time, have allowed those structures to be converted into accessory dwelling units. There's a lot of interest in that for obvious reasons. It's oftentimes can be more affordable to convert an existing structure that you have into a dwelling unit. So we get these types of questions frequently. Again, we're in somewhat of a new world from a residential regulatory perspective. And increasingly we've received requests about converting these types of accessory structures into full-on dwelling units. And the primary distinction, and usually actually people don't know the difference between those two, but when we have to filter their question through the code, the distinction comes down to we have a maximum footprint allowance for accessory dwelling units of 900 square feet or 800 square feet. Sorry, thank you, Vera. And 900 square feet for cottage clusters. Is that our? Yeah. Okay. They all. Yeah. So, when the structure footprint is larger than 800 square feet, previously we have some pathways in the code that would allow you to still maybe make that conversion. But one option that people have now is just to say, we can just call that a detached duplex. As opposed to an ADU. There's some differences in system development charges, but apart from that, it's just another pretty clean option for folks. And the one hiccup that we have currently is the setback standards. So ADUs sort of have a 5-foot rear and side yard setback requirement. Primary dwelling units have an increased rear yard setback. The idea being that, these were larger units, and so the sort of impact on neighboring properties was going to be greater. What this, proposal would allow for is to exempt existing structures, existing residential accessory structures that aren't proposing a sort of expansion of the footprint itself. The footprint already exists. It's larger than 800 square feet, and we would this adds code language that says those structures can become a plex unit. And we aren't going to consider the rear yard setback requirement. That doesn't mean that they can, expand and get bigger. It just means that, for legally established accessory structures, you can convert that into a plex. And this language would say that we're not going to worry about the rear yard setback. So it just provides some additional regulatory relief for folks who want to add a new dwelling unit and have a legally established accessory structure on their property. And I say legally established, this doesn't mean that you could, put up a 1,200 square foot structure in your backyard without any permits and say, well, this is pre-existing. Can I not convert this into so legally established, meaning that you went through the proper procedures at the time to build that structure and got the permits that you needed. It also establishes a sort of established by date. So it would go into effect the date that this ordinance would be signed, adopting this code, to sort of preclude sort of after the fact saying I'm going to build this and then ask for that exemption requirement. So this is standard language that we have elsewhere in the code for this similar type of issue. Any questions about this one?
Yeah, I have a question about it. You've kind of talked about rear yard setbacks, but I'm wondering about side yard setbacks. So does it change anything there? And I'm just thinking there are certainly some properties where you might have an established accessory structure or a detached garage that's already within the setback.
Yeah.
And so what would it mean for someone wanting to convert that garage into now a plex?
Yeah, it's a good question. The language that we proposed here says, except for the setback standards of the applicable base zone. So it doesn't differentiate between rear and side yard setbacks. It's all of them.
So it would then allow
that conversion.
garage to be converted.
Correct.
And then how would it work if that garage, I feel like I'm remembering a story, at least in another jurisdiction, where like you could use the established like wall line on your garage within the setback to like extend your wall. I mean, we even had something here at Planning Commission 2 years ago or so. It was very contentious. So like, I'm just trying to think about those situations, because I imagine someone learning that their neighbor is now converting their garage into a duplex and it's within the setbacks, like there might be some consternation over that.
For sure. Yeah, that situation would not be covered under this exemption. The expansion of
So if the garage footprint didn't change at all, it could maybe vertically go, could it vertically go up? No, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess you hear the kind of the gaming I'm trying to do, but it sounds like any of that gaming would just take you to a type 3.
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Sherman, I just want to reflect that I felt very similarly and have posed that question multiple angles myself, because I'm very curious about that. I do think that it's, in this situation, we're working within the walls of the existing building. There's no vertical extension of the building. What this would limit, I guess you could say, is say you have, a garage and it's already within the setback, the only option for them to continue to use that building if they wanted to make it an ADU now would be to physically move the building, which would be extremely expensive and, potentially be less sustainable than to just using the building there. I also am very concerned with and have seen examples that have concerned me of, buildings that are potentially closer than I would like to see. And I think that the way that this is written, tailored specifically to being within the walls of the existing, and then, even thinking, it has to be the 800 square foot limit. It's not like they could put 4 units. It's very unlikely someone's going to try to put 4 units into an existing garage with 800 square feet. Maybe there's a world where that happens in the future, but I don't think that's really a risk now.
Any other questions on this one? Deliberation? No? Okay. And this will all be brought back to you. We have if you saw in the staff report, there's a little teaser of additional items, episode 2, items to come. So if you're excited now, just wait.
I think on the reference that I was just kind of wondering broadly, is there any interplay between the things we're talking about and those things, or are they all kind of discrete? I was just kind of wondering as I was reviewing, it's like, should we be thinking holistically about this?
There will be a few additional items added to sort of the realm of design and development standards, but they're kind of discrete. They're kind of their own issues, yeah.
Thanks.
Even, with these, they're somewhat related, but they're kind of stand on their own as well. But trying to get your mind in, to your point, in that zone. Okay, so moving on to item 1.3, this is about townhouses. This is, so townhouses are considered sort of a distinct development type, like accessory dwelling units or cottage clusters. They're their own thing. It's an attached unit on its own fee simple lot. That's not a middle housing land divided lot. That's got made some things quite complicated just from a communication standpoint recently. But this is really just about sort of trying to align 2 different standards that we have in the code for townhouses. So like 1 to 4 unit development, townhouses are required to meet some minimum design standards. We have a list of 17 options that folks can choose from. That includes items like, sort of simple things like a gabled or hip roof, or 12-inch eaves, or a bay window, and then can get more complicated, sort of a minimum allowance for like trying to accommodate solar development on a house. So there are 17 of those items, and development, whether you're 1 to 4 units or you're a townhouse, you need to choose 5 of those is what our code requires. So one of them that is commonly chosen by folks sort of across development styles is a porch, a front porch that meets minimum dimensional standards. So we have that requirement is a 5 by 5 porch. Townhouses are unique in that they also have what's called a transition area standard. And this is about sort of, I think, trying to create a relationship between the townhouse unit itself and the streetscape. We have, there are 2 ways that you can meet this. You can meet this through a vertical transition area requirement. So that's about sort of usually a staircase ascending up to the front entryway, or you can do this horizontal transition area. And that is a very similar requirement to our front porch design standard. The difference being that for the transition area requirement, we have a different dimension requirement for the front porch than for the design standards. So we have sort of 2 sets of design standards for townhouses. We have very similar requirements for front porches, but slightly different numbers between those 2 standards. This has just been somewhat awkward in like reviewing applications with builders, that we're often saying you need to look at this and you also need to look at this, the design standards and also the transition area standards. And yes, we recognize that these front porch standards are slightly different. And what we've tried to do here is basically just align the 2 of them. So I think you could have gone either way with this. We opted to change the design standard from 5 by 5 to make it a 6-foot in-depth requirement, because that's what the transition area standard required. But you could have easily reduced the transition area standard, I think, to 5 feet. So there's some room there for some deliberation, and maybe you can, I don't know if Chair Graytruck has any, insight or special knowledge to share about townhouse transition area standards, but the proposal is to bring up the design standard to 6 feet in depth. Take any questions on this one.
My only thought on this one is you're taking away potentially some of the front landscaping area, adding more cost in material for builders, having to have an extra foot of, porch to cover that. That's just my only thought there, that you're reducing potentially landscaping or recreation area. It's likely going to be small in a townhouse.
Yeah.
Just adding a little bit of cost to a project.
Yeah, it's a good point. Cost consideration, loss of landscaping, maybe loss of flexibility.
It's not huge, but
Yeah.
I mean, all these little things add up.
I think that makes a good point. I mean, with every, cost benefit loss, so you lose some landscaping, but you gain what would be a more substantial porch, which by some perspectives may be seen as more aesthetically pleasing than having kind of the micro porches. That was kind of how I read this. I liked seeing the conformity going out to 6 feet instead of shrinking down to 5 for that reason.
My non-expert research showed that if you would like to have furniture and also a walkway in front of the furniture, that 6 feet is kind of the standard. Because I was trying to understand just myself the background on this transition area requirement and what justified that 6 foot depth, and that's what my very non-expert research showed.
And that's where my mind also first went to, was just thinking about a configuration of furniture. It allows for maybe a more livable space versus areas that you just see kind of getting clutter kind of built up on them because they're not actually usable spaces. So they get garbage cans and such. Maybe it would encourage more use of that space, would be the thought.
Any concerns with shading? Loss of sunlight
No, that's a,
and an additional foot of covered porch?
or an additional foot of, rain coverage and weather protection.
Yeah, it goes both
different
ways.
times of the year.
Yeah.
Because so there's that cost benefit. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a story to be told. I would ask, if a developer was to come and ask for, well, it's not necessarily even asking for a variance. That could just be not one of the 17 that they try to meet.
Totally. Yeah.
So if they did decide to do a 5x5 or even a 3x5, they wanted a really tiny porch, they could still do that. It just wouldn't allow them to use that porch as one of the 17 criteria.
And they would have to satisfy that transition area requirement in a different way.
Okay,
They would have to meet the vertical transition area requirement.
okay. So there would be another option for them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I'm okay as is.
I appreciate that.
Just
feedback.
adding some perspective, that's all.
Yeah. No, it's appreciated. And I think our main interest here was alignment between the two. So, okay. Yep. Can always come back to this one. Right. Moving on to item 1.4. This is another one of those where this is more of a housekeeping code amendment than it is policy oriented, but it's, so we regulate fences in the city under subsection 195025. The way that it works is it's broken up into sort of land use categories. So, commercial properties being grouped together, residential properties being grouped together, and establishing a set of standards for fencing. I think this is just a legacy code section that we've had for quite some time in the city, and it hadn't necessarily, it's never been clear to staff, where sort of the downtown zone specifically fit into this list. It seemed most likely commercial. But we just wanted to add a little bit of clarity. So this proposal just basically adds language to the commercial section regulating fencing in the city and says, in addition to commercial zones, we're talking about downtown and our commercial mixed use zones. Yeah, okay. Yep, moving on.
Would that, would that allow 6-foot fences on the kind of facade facing property line? I guess it would,
think-
right? Because it would,
Yeah,
it's clarifying
It would.
that this would be allowed
Yeah.
in downtown.
Yeah.
Imagine most people won't do that, but is
Agreed.
that the kind of thing, do we want 6-foot fences at the front of a property?
we did consider looking at developing fencing standards specifically for downtown. But I think it would mostly, it might be height, it might be materials based.
Yeah.
I don't, maybe Vera can weigh in on.
Not to take us on a side
yeah.
tangent, but it's just, I think for a side yard or rear yard property line, I think that would definitely make sense. But just thinking about that in the downtown zone for the front, might we want a different standard?
Well, there will be a 6-foot wrought iron fence around the food park. that's part of their design, which is
And
the
we
same
spent,
as the
but we
dome.
also spent time talking
Yes, we
about
did.
like what
Yep.
that fence was gonna look like.
Yeah, we did,
Yeah.
because the downtown code, when that was rewritten, oh, and Brett just left very conveniently. And this has come up before, though, is that I think I have this right, they actually actively did not talk about fencing in the downtown as a design feature or aspect. So we don't have any direction in the code what kind of fences are allowed in the downtown from a design standpoint. Certainly the food park talked about it's going to be a nice iron whatever fence and that kind of thing, which is great. But we talk about a design review for height for fences. If it's over 4 feet, there is design review, but we don't have any direction on what it actually needs to look like. So,
Okay.
yeah, so the code, that'll be something, that would be sort of another thing
Well,
to talk about, I think.
maybe
Yeah.
just my own perspective, but knowing this is work session, maybe it's just a thing you can think about as you're moving through this housekeeping kind of process. And you can come back with a recommendation if you do want to be more precise or an argument against why you don't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate
and
it.
I think also ideally with new buildings, they're coming to the front lot line, right? But we have
Yeah.
many existing
Yeah.
buildings that are set back, like the Mason's Lodge over here, some of the office buildings that we have across from City Hall. If I'm thinking of them building a 6-foot fence on Main Street, it's not not
necessarily
too
desirable.
Yeah, not desirable
Yeah.
to active use and promoting an active pedestrian interaction. So,
Yeah, we
yeah,
could take
I would think about that.
I think it could be worth revisiting. Yeah, to pull out downtown and take a closer look specifically. But yeah, the food cart pod is exactly what I was thinking, because I know that was a specific talking point.
Yeah, I will say that in this instance, the downtown addition here is more just clarifying for the code section that we would apply if somebody did currently come to us with a question. So I don't think this, again, necessarily changes anything in how we would today apply the code. I think the conversation around, do we want to consider further regulations in downtown for fencing is a good one. And yeah, I think we immediately sort of thought of the food park. And then, yeah, I think when we're looking more into this, we can sort of also just consider the full scope of downtown design standards that we have and how likely it would be that somebody would even be able to add such a fence, given that, yeah, it's just one of the more involved code sections in terms of requirements. So, but yeah, appreciate it. There could be some less than ideal proposals out there. Okay. Okay. So, okay, moving on to item 1.5. This is a nice lead-in, if this is the one that I'm thinking of. Oh, no, this is back to design standards in 1 to 4 unit development. So this in that exemption, that 50-foot exemption from being required to comply with the 1 to 4 unit design standards that Commissioner Sherman was mentioning earlier. This has been a tricky one. We have had a number of internal staff discussions as the issue is basically that as, when we amended the code in 2021-22 to comply with the middle housing state statutes, we extended the existing design standards that we had for single detached dwellings to middle housing types. So plex development, basically. We said, well, we've already got these standards, and generally what the state is looking for jurisdictions to do is to treat these new housing types the same as they treat single detached dwellings. And so since we already have these design standards, we will just require a duplex to meet the same design standards as a single detached dwelling. Simple enough, right? What we have seen is we have seen more applications come in for middle housing is that it's not so simple. A duplex or a quadplex can take on many different forms. It can be proposed as a sort of single building mass with, maybe one entrance on the front and an entrance on the side and an entrance on the back. It can be proposed as sort of individualized, articulated dwelling units like we were talking about with attached ADUs. They're sort of really trying to make it clear that there are two dwellings happening here. And as we've been trying to apply these standards, it's just not always been clear how exactly they should apply to these various configurations. A sort of a related issue is that we in Milwaukie are blessed with these skinny but very deep lots that are just a product from sort of historic development patterns. Our Victory Garden lots, we call them, and they accommodate a lot of new development, but not always in a sort of very traditional, street-facing development pattern. And our code allows a sort of a decent amount of flexibility for doing attached or detached plex units. And so you can have, what seems to be compelling for folks is to oftentimes purchase a lot, keep the historic house, which is great. We're preserving existing housing stock in the city, and then add maybe a unit or two on the rear of the property. But those aren't necessarily facing the street. We've currently have code language that talks about these design standards apply to those street-facing dwellings, but they also apply whenever your unit is facing a sort of a common shared open space or is facing a pedestrian pathway. That at the time seemed like a reasonable, it would accommodate these sort of side-facing units, on the rear of the lot. But even that language, sort of facing a pedestrian pathway, got pretty complicated pretty quickly. For example, should we be requiring every facade, every sort of face of, and I know that facade can also sometimes be sort of understood to be just defining the sort of street-facing primary, face of the building, but it can also be sort of interpreted as every face of the building itself. And so should we be requiring sort of, if you've got a shared pedestrian pathway leading to the back of the lot, should we be requiring the side of those units to be meeting these minimum design standards? The back of the units, should they have to meet the minimum design standards? And after, many internal discussions, I think what we, because we really started talking about, well, what is the intent of these design standards? Is it to, establish a minimum level of design for the every resident of that development? Is it for neighbors? And I think that there are merits to all of those arguments. I think where we landed and where this code proposal goes would be to, what really we're trying to do with these minimum design standards is to regulate the relationship between the public realm and the private realm. And so this ties into this 50-foot exemption, and sort of looking at that exemption for guidance for how we should be thinking about this, because that exemption we've had in the code for quite some time for single detached dwellings that basically says, if you're more than 50 feet from the street property line, we're not going to require you to meet these minimum design standards. So that's existed for some time, and sort of in thinking through this issue and how we're applying these, we thought, well, let's use that as our guiding light. And let's say if for plex development as well, if you're more than 50 feet from and you'll see the language in here, the street, sort of street adjacent property line, you are exempt from the design standards. And the street adjacent property line is important because we now allow for backlots in the city, and we have for some time allowed for flag lots, but the way that we define front property lines for flag lots includes not only, your front lot line is not only the portion that is abutting the street, but it's also the portion of the lot line that is sort of the bottom of the flag itself, so to speak. So we would, those developments on those deep flag lots would also be required historically to meet the minimum design standards, because while you're very much more than 50 feet from the street, you were not more than 50 feet from the front property line. So we added clarity here for that as well, to sort of say, again, thinking about, we're regulating the relationship between the public and the private realm. So while those rear units, still might be visible from the streetscape itself, we're not going to, we're not going to make them meet those minimum design standards. So I know that one was a lot. I would have benefited from some more visuals. Here's an example. So this is a recent quadplex development on a flag lot on King Boulevard. So that's roughly 225 feet. So visible from the street. If you're walking by on the sidewalk, you can see the units. And at the time when this was developed, they were required to meet the minimum design standards. But the proposal would say, moving forward, this project is exempt. We think that likely we will still see a minimum level of design on a lot of these developments that, builders in our experience are, they're selling a product into the market, and there's demand for a minimum level of design. But we would not be reviewing it for that. Just those two. Yeah, this is another example on Home Ave. And that was less than, sorry, I meant to add the setback there, but it's not quite 225 feet as you could see here, but it's more than 50.
Thanks, Ryan. It feels a little bit of an abstraction, so it's helpful to have some photos here. What's the downside to making this change? Is it, I think your point of builders are creating products to be sold in the marketplace, and buyers want some basic level of design. But what would the downside be? Just we're on air, not in a room, so I won't cuss. But something that looks really poor.
Yeah, I think we have we have seen proposals that are less than ideal when it comes to minimum level of design. I think that the risk would be that we get a development on a flag lot or a back lot that is a box. I don't know if Vera wants to put it differently.
No, I mean, I think that gets there. I think part of the challenge that we've had with applying our design standards is all the various ways that you can configure these units on a lot now. It was really simple before we had middle housing. And part of it too, though, was that, I mean, flag lots are an example. We also have detached plexes. So you have 2 and 2 and 2. And at some point, we're also trying to figure out, well, what if, if the 2 front units are backloaded, and then you have your front units, you have some pictures, I think. Yeah.
Sort of like this is the
so if that top one, so where the red circle is, so that's sort of the front unit, because the street's to your right, and there's a driveway that everybody uses, and so you have your 2 front units, and then you have your 2 rear units. The front units their back door is to the driveway, but to the back units, their front door is to this driveway, so they have a shared paved area in the middle. And we're applying the standards to the front of those back units. But what if they wanted to actually have them turned a different direction or sideways or something else? And at some point, we wanted to at least have this conversation to try to suss out what is important to us, from what should we be regulating? And I think Brian said that really well. Is it our relationship from the public realm? You know, we have this 50-foot number that seemed to work for a really long time, and that we understand that maybe rear units may not have, you know, the articulation that we require. It's not just about, you know, it's about minimum glazing, it's about articulation, it's, and then those 5 of the 17, you know, and they're pretty easy to meet, to be honest. You know, eaves, lap siding, a front porch, a gable roof, and you're facing south and you meet it. I mean, so our 5, you know, standards don't necessarily guarantee, you know, architectural wonders. But it's a minimum standard. And I think, so we're really trying to figure out a good way to handle all of these different kinds of configurations when they could be 200 feet from the street, and not visible generally to the public, so.
And please others, especially those more trained in architecture, I'd appreciate your thoughts. I mean, because it sounds like some of what you're grappling with is not so much the depth from the public realm. That's one way we can think about it, but it sounds like you're grappling with how do we apply requirements in funky configurations, and what is front and what is up, what is down, and those kinds of things. So
Exactly.
is there another way that we could kind of go about it where you maybe keep some design standards, but you have to identify what the front is, and then based off of that, then you can clearly and objectively say, okay, this is the front, so these standards don't apply to the back and they don't apply to the sides.
I think there are so many different ways that we could go about it. I think that it's a good point. The 50-foot exemption is a sort of one prescription for the issue that we identified. And the issue is that these are, the design standards as currently written are challenging to apply. The way that we worked through it, the conclusion that we came to is let's exempt these rear units, but that is not the only way that we could solve this issue. I think what I would ask from the commission, if possible, is if there are other sort of, principles or that you would want us to consider in thinking through a solution. The one that we identified, of course, was that sort of relationship between the public and private realm.
If I could jump in, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Chair. I just had one point, because part of this is this, you know, the 50-foot and the relationship to the street, but we're also seeing, and I see more of these in Portland than I've seen here, but we're getting some of them now where the first unit is facing the street, really traditional looking house facing the street. And then you have a couple of units right behind it. It's all attached, and the way those back units get there, and this is an example, is that there's a walkway down the side and their doors are on the side. And so the way our code is written right now, that those side units have to meet the standards, even though it's literally sideways. They're 5 feet from the property line. And so it's their main entrance, and their relationship is to their neighbor. It's definitely not to the street, because you're walking up a little sidewalk and you're going into your house. And I think with our narrow deep lots, there's one that's going to be starting construction on Monroe pretty soon. I think this might even be it. This is Harrison, sorry. So that was another one that was, you know, they are meeting them, but it's kind of this, it's much more difficult on a sideways kind of thing, trying to find ways to do the articulation, and because it's all one large building, you know, that's, you know, it could be, you know, 85, 90 feet long, trying to articulate that as well. So these ones, frankly, for me, are more challenging than the back lots, because you're still facing forward, we can make that work, but the sideways ones are challenging as well. But the way our code is written, if it's facing a shared public pathway, that's your front, and you need to meet those standards too. So that was part of our trying to get to this kind of a configuration as well.
I appreciate that. I think overall, my primary concern is with the facade section that is visible from the public right of way. So when you're saying you have, for this example, you know, if you had that first unit that's actually visible, because
granted, it is a ways back, but when you have the opening of the driveway itself, that literally zeroes in your focus on the property.
Yeah.
It really draws your attention to the building from the roadway. I grew up in Oak Grove where there isn't similar, there's a lot of interesting flags, a lot of interesting things happen in people's backyards, particularly in the 90s. And I think that there's a reason why we want to see the front-facing facade have a level of articulation. There could be a place where, and I recognize this was originally mostly seen as like a housekeeping item, but now that you're seeing kind of the complexity of that, I think there's a world where perhaps units that are obscured from the right-of-way, due to other buildings obscuring the view, those should not have any sort of requirement, should not have the same requirement as one where the facade is clearly visible at the end of the driveway.
Yeah.
Or if you have it, like you're saying, the shared kind of pathways, I agree, I don't see a reason to require a standard along this shared pathway facades, because they don't, it's more like an apartment, really, in that way, where what's happening in the middle of the buildings, I think, is of less concern as what the main, facing gable or main facing, angle, what it's a shed, whatever is facing forward to the roadway. That's would be my primary concern.
Yeah.
And then I also just want to note that in the example that you provide with King Road, I drive past that every day. I actually was happy to see the articulation and kind of the detail on the back lot. The opposite is my personal, I'll use the softest word I can here, dislike of what is happening in front of the primary building. And I know that that's not what we're discussing right now. When the lot was originally being developed and or the three lots were being developed, and I saw the articulation on the rear property, I actually thought it was kind of nice that this, multifamily kind of unit had some articulation, had some design. I thought it was actually kind of unique, and it was nice to see. I'm far more concerned in general with what's going on in front of houses, because that's where I see that's the next step in fully utilizing people's property. They're going to be not just doing the flag on the back, it's going to be what's happening in front. So I think that's somewhere I'd like to see us put effort and thought. But in this particular situation, I understand that it's mostly housekeeping. And I also understand that there, our general, people want to see certain design standards. They want to see a certain level of design for the building to be purchased. So I think that kind of inherently maintains a level of beauty, or should in some way. But considering that reaching 5 of 17 isn't particularly difficult, if there was some nuance to how it could be written to specifically the unit that's visible, perhaps at the end of the driveway, if a driveway terminates at a facade, versus if you had a driveway that then they're tucked behind, then you don't see them at all. Like if all the entrances, you go down and then you go into 3 different garages that direction, it's going to be very different than viewing straight down, straight shot.
Yeah. No, point taken. And this particular item, I think, is not classified as housekeeping. This one we feel like was maybe the sort of heaviest of the sort of like policy light items, because we're talking about, changing how we're regulating, development from a design standard perspective. So, and point taken on the sort of, there's a tunnel, sort of, so to speak, that sort of gets you a straight shot of the units on the back here. I think the challenge for us was really in not getting to where we started the conversation with the attached ADUs, where we're, and what Vera was saying about sort of trying to define visibility from the public street, right? And sort of like, are we doing like view sheds and calculations and trying to like, if you're assuming you're a 5'5" person and here's your, right, that gets from just an administrative perspective, like pretty challenging. So yeah, I think that, I don't know that the 50-foot exemption was our, in the sort of ideal world, where we would have landed. But I think given sort of our concerns about administering the code, that's where we ended up.
I think I'll chime in and say, I think I like having some level of design standards, even if it is turned sideways. I think that while we certainly matter what it looks like from the public realm, I don't want to be entirely dismissive of adjacent property owners who might not have any choice with what's happening next door to them, and having something looking aesthetically pleasing and meeting some of those design standards isn't necessarily a bad thing. So I understand it can make your jobs difficult in terms of reviewing things, but just thinking about adjacent property owners, I think there's probably some value that kind of comes there. So if there's a way to maintain a level of design and help you all review applications better, that's the path that I'd like to see us go down. But others might have differing opinions.
I feel heard and seen, first of all. And yeah, I appreciate the expression of principles. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a million thoughts and I don't know where to begin. I guess I'll start by echoing Commissioner Sherman. I feel like the primary emphasis should be put on the streetscape, what's facing the right of way. However, I feel like, the lived experience doesn't end at the street, and the people who are engaging with the facade, especially neighbors, those who are utilizing those shared entryways, deserve to have a level of design just as much as anyone that's utilizing the main right-of-way. I think it's valuable and to have that, to have some level of design in those spaces. I think we're almost having two different, we can break this up into two different discussions, because there's the discussion of the 50-foot limit, and then there's kind of where we get into the weeds with attached, detached, where things get messy. I don't think I have answers for you there. But continuing on looking at this image, this is something that sticks out to me on my commute very frequently, and on the King Road. And I think it goes to show that the facade can be really impactful much further beyond 50 feet. Because this really sticks out like a sore thumb to me. I think whether or not you appreciate kind of the modern style, it is not necessarily in keeping with its surroundings, and does stick out. Yeah, I think design can be really impactful from even that great of a distance. I do think that when we are getting that far back, or potentially along in those lots where we are side facing, tucked behind, we could explore options like maybe reduced design requirements, how many they have to hit. But the idea of doing away with them, I think, is a dangerous territory to explore. I think it does bring in the realm of possibility the box. yeah, those are just some of my thoughts. And I've also been kind of toying with the ideas of like the common courtyard. So I have some experiences of homes that all kind of face a common courtyard, and that very much has the lived experiences of the residents is kind of facing each other in that respect, with private access drives through kind of alleys that way. So I think, yeah, this might be part of a much larger discussion, but those are the things that are popping out to me immediately, in not the most eloquent way, but yeah.
Thank you.
More to come.
Yeah, more to come. We will take another shot at this. Thanks for the feedback, y'all. Okay, yeah, cognizant of the time here. I do the next two sort of broad topics. I think we'll move a little bit more quickly than this. Okay, item 1.6. So again, we're talking here about the 1 to 4 unit residential development design standards. And this is specifically the subsection that addresses like how do these standards apply when somebody is doing a remodel, addition, or a conversion that creates a new dwelling unit. So there are two sort of proposed edits here. One is just that the language specifically references converting an existing single detached dwelling into a duplex, triplex, or quadplex. This subsection, as staff understands it, actually applies also if you were converting an existing duplex into a triplex. So that's more of a housekeeping change, just sort of removing the reference to single detached dwellings to be sure that this is covering any situation where you're adding a new unit and in that 1 to 4 unit category. And then the other is also just sort of there appeared to be an internal inconsistency in the language here, stating both that that in these situations that, let me see, if I can get the exact language here. Basically it appears that both, that these types of conversions where you're adding a new dwelling unit are both exempt, and also that they require compliance. And so there's just, we're basically just striking that to make it clear that the applicable provisions apply to any situation where a new dwelling unit is added. Does this make sense? Okay, thank you. No, you're fine. Sorry, I'm a little bit, my brain is starting to get scrambled at this point. Trying to keep all these things straight. So, okay, no questions, thank you. Moving on to item 1.7. So, let's see. This is about the downtown design standards. When development happens in the downtown zone, there are 3 sort of different sections of code that one needs to be looking at. One is the mostly development standards in 19304. Again, those are sort of our floor area ratio requirements, our maximum height standards, setbacks from property lines, these types of requirements. There are the design standards, which again is things like the pedestrian orientation, in 19508. And then there is a section in 19907 that gives you information about review of applications. So what level of land use review is required for new development or conversions or additions in the downtown zone. This can get a little bit confusing to sort of navigate between these 3 different code sections. As we have been, fortunately seeing a lot of redevelopment in the downtown, we have struggled a little bit to know exactly how these code sections are talking to one another. Specifically, you could, and we have read through 19907, again, that section that's talking about how to review applications and sort of gotten to a place where we say, oh, we should be doing land use review here. The code tells us we should be doing land use review. We would then go to 508, which is the design standards for downtown development, and sort of filter through its own applicability language. And it would seemingly be saying that there are no standards that apply here. So 907 is saying we should be doing downtown design review. 508 is saying nothing is applicable. What should we be reviewing for? So the primary issue here we sort of found was in 508, there was just some missing applicability language where the title of the subsection sort of seemed to address, resident or changes to the facades of buildings downtown, which is primarily the type of work that we've seen happen downtown recently, or not primarily, but we have seen a lot of work on existing structures. So the title would seem to have captured those types of changes, but then if you read the paragraph below it, it did not talk about changes to the facade at all. So you would read through that, and again, it would seem like nothing was applicable. And so this is really, again, kind of a housekeeping amendment where we are just adding into the paragraph text itself references to changes to existing buildings or structures to make sure that the title matches the paragraph language matches the title, and so that we are all clear about that, when you're making changes to existing buildings downtown, here are the code sections that apply. Yep. Questions, concerns?
Appreciate the clarity.
Yes, great, thank you.
Is there anything that could be done on the first bullet of downtown development regulated by 3 separate sections? I mean, I've been sitting on this commission for 5.5 years now, and I think we all have to do the mental gymnastics to talk about this and its relationship to that, and then it's just maybe it's part of a broader streamlining, but it's not like you all struggle to explain it to us, so that feels problematic.
What if I told you that if you really understand the nature of the code, that it does make sense why things are located where they are? Would that make you feel better?
You just try harder. Yeah, or going back to the Matrix reference earlier
Yes.
tonight, it's just, yeah.
Understood. If where there are opportunities to streamline the code, we are always looking for them. And yeah, we recognize this is just one of the more confusing matrices.
I think downtown benefits from the fact that we've created a whole separate way of reviewing downtown development. And so we have 3 sections because 907 is just how to review. And 508 tells us what it's supposed to look like. And so those are the actual design standards. And then 304 is how tall can the buildings be and the setback. So it does make sense, but when you actually have to apply it to a project, you're flipping literal pages back and forth or screens to try to suss out where you are. But point taken, I wish it was in only 2 sections instead of 3, but I'm not sure if we'll get there.
We can keep telling you why it makes sense if you'd like.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, if there are any follow-up questions on that, feel free to reach out to Brett specifically, who has escaped again. Yeah. So, okay, moving on to topic 2. I think these next 2 might go a little bit more quickly. So this is state required fixes primarily. House Bill 3560, which was adopted in the last legislative session, basically required local jurisdictions to amend their development codes to allow for childcare centers, which is sort of defined in state statute, and what part of this amendment here gets at alignment-wise. It said jurisdictions, you need to update your development codes to allow childcare centers or daycares in more zones in your city. So any commercial zone, any high-density residential zone, any industrial zone that is not heavy industrial, which none of our zones would be classified as heavy industrial, you have to allow by right child care centers. So these amendments are adding definitions for a child care center. There's some clarifying with some language that is stricken from family child care homes, which is more like you are watching kids, like your own kids and kids of friends in your own home up to a certain limit. We cannot regulate those any more strictly than we would regulate any other activity that somebody would be doing in their home. So you have people over, we don't regulate that. So this is considered the same. So we previously had sort of classified those types of uses as home occupations because it kind of made sense. We were just finding an analogy in our code for it, and it seemed to fit into this home occupation category. But I think out of an abundance of caution, we've stricken that language because we do have sort of operational standards for home occupations that we would apply. And what the state has said here is that we have to treat these like any other activity in your home that we're not regulating. So that home occupation reference is stricken from family home care or family child care homes. We've amended our definition for child care centers. We've to match how the state defines it in the ORS, and we've basically taken out our existing daycare center, which is what we would now refer to as a child care center. We've also added, and this just was a sort of opportunistic amendment. We fielded a call, and we've over the years fielded a few calls about adult daycare services. The specific question being where, if anywhere, in the city of Milwaukie can I operate an adult daycare center? Our code does not. It's silent on adult daycare centers. And so we saw these amendments as just an opportunity to add a definition for adult daycare centers, and also we thought the use characteristics were very similar for an adult. And the state refers to these as adult day services. We thought the use characteristics were very similar to child care centers, and that this was an opportunity for us to get clarity and be a little bit more permissive for these needed services in Milwaukie. So the first amendments here is just about definitional work. The second set of amendments is about actually amending the use tables themselves. And so just adding in the child care centers as a permitted use, replacing daycare language, and removing daycares, which previously required a community service use application, removing that from the community service use section of the code. And just to be clear on the adult day services, the House bill didn't mention those. So we have complete flexibility on how we want to regulate those. But it seems, again, the use characteristics very similar, and there's been interest in, from the community and opening those facilities. And so we opted to add in adult day services as a permitted use in our high density residential zone, our commercial zones, but we did not decide to add it in as a permitted outright use in our industrial zones. And the thought there was basically about, as you saw tonight, we have certain policies around preserving industrial land. We have processes in place to accommodate uses in those zones, but the goal, the comprehensive plan is still encouraging staff to be thinking about employment opportunities, specifically industrial employment opportunities, and preserving lands within the city for those uses. And so since we had flexibility here, our initial proposal was not to allow those in our industrial lands, but to be more permissive by right, but to be more permissive elsewhere. Any questions on any of those changes?
I just want to note that I think this is a big step forward towards making more affordable services available to folks. I appreciate that you put the thought into the adult care. I think that is such an important need, and I see it really strongly, and it connects members of my family, and I feel like if there were more opportunities for care, it would be more affordable.
I do appreciate the nuance, though, with the industrial for the adult care, because I think that I actually think it's helpful to have some childcare services mixed in with light industrial, because it's closer to where you go to work. So that has a lot of benefit. And I also think children, as much as I prefer daycare facilities with outdoor areas, I don't think they always have to have outdoor areas, particularly for infants. There's a lot that can be done inside. You can, keep a space fun and playful, but it's much harder to do that, I would say, for an adult care facility. And I'd be more concerned with them being, not having exposure to the outdoors. So I think that's a very valid addition and a nice nuance. So I was really pleased to see this, and I really like how it's written. No issues at all.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to move on to topic 3. We can always circle back to this. So this is about plats. Plats are the sort of official map that is used to show newly created lots. So when you are doing a partition or a subdivision of land, the plat is the document, it is the map showing the configuration of those lots. So in Milwaukie, we have a sort of 2 phases to the platting process. There's the preliminary plat approval and the final plat approval. And something that staff have felt for a long time that's been missing from that. So the preliminary approval is where we do the initial review. We confirm that the proposal is consistent with all of the applicable standards in Title 17, which is the land division chapter, and also Title 19, the zoning code. And we look at the plat, we make sure it's conforming with the code. And then the final platting process is really just a final review. It's where we get the actual Mylars from the surveyor. We sign them. We make sure that it has all the appropriate references that it needs to have to, for example, land use applications or easement language, maybe restrictions that have been applied through the land use process. So this is where we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's. And we review the subdivisions and minor land partitions are reviewed through a type 2 process. So there's public notice. And then the final plat process is reviewed through a type 1 review. It's purely administrative. And because again, everybody's been noticed, we're just making sure that that everything is consistent. In the past, staff have observed that sometimes, folks dividing land want to make minor modifications to in between the preliminary plat approval and the final plat approval. Minor modifications that are still consistent with the standards that are applicable. Our code does not, as it currently reads, it says that a final plat, the approval criteria state that a final plat must basically conform to the preliminary plat approval. And it doesn't allow for sort of any adjustments between those 2 phases. So the language that we've proposed here, we've identified this as an issue. Vera did some research and identified that there is code language. Other jurisdictions treat this a little bit differently. For example, Portland does allow for minor adjustments between these 2 phases up to specified amounts. So the lot can be, lots can be up to 5% different between the preliminary and the final plat approval. So long as everything still conforms with the code requirements, meaning you could read that as, in other words, it would have been approved in the preliminary review as well. And so this code language just adopts the language that Portland currently has in its code to say we also will allow for small changes between the preliminary and final plat approvals, so long as they are consistent with the code requirements. Any questions, concerns about this?
All right, 3 quick things on this one.
Perfect.
First, I just want to mention, I think this seems reasonable and provides flexibility without triggering extensive rework, thus saving money. That's great to see. One question, would the applicant be required to summarize these modifications for easy identification? Or do you I mean, I don't want to see folks scouring the plans to figure out where the changes were. I would highly recommend requiring them to,
Love it.
detail that to you so that you can easily check where those changes occurred so that you can actually back check and confirm, quality check that it is only 5%.
Yeah.
Instead of just them saying, oh, we made a few changes, I promise it's minor. Don't always trust people. Also, just quality, like, people make mistakes. And then you had mentioned, that Portland has identified this as something that they use, or you've identified this as something that Portland uses. Maybe just considering and looking into whether there's been any issues or negative impacts that have been identified in Portland since this change was made. So just looking at, follow through. Has anything negative come from this? Has anything positive come from this?
Yep.
And to look at those different options.
Yeah.
Overall, sounds like it's probably going to be a really good choice, but just making sure that folks are clear.
Yep. Thank you. Good suggestions. Great. That's it. All right.
Episode 1.
Episode 1. You're welcome. Thank you, though, seriously, for your attention and the good questions, the guidance. We will circle back to these items and, bring you part 2. And with that, I'll hand it back.
All right. Well, at this point, the agenda, the commission will act as the Community Involvement Advisory Committee. Does anyone including the audience members, have any items to report? All right. Do commissioners have any other items for discussion?
I just wanted to mention, as any community members tuning in online, I know it's the 24th today. On February 26th, Metro is hosting its last Community Choice Design Workshop. They're hosting it down in Oregon City at the Robert Libke Public Safety Building, 6 to 8 p.m. This is kind of a design process to help allocate $2 to $3 million of funding for parks projects. We have a number of projects potential for Milwaukie, so if anyone wants to tune into that and weigh in, that'd be great. And then other than that, there was a really amazing sauna festival that happened in the park just a few weeks ago. Really thought it activated the park in a pretty amazing sort of way, especially in the winter when things are normally pretty quiet down there. I know they had a few permitting issues, not with the city, but with the Parks and Recreation District that I hope don't happen when they try and do their sauna festival again next year. And maybe the city can try and lean in a little extra and help them get access to water and electricity and some other pretty basics for organizing a large spread event in the park. But by all measures, it was very successful. That's it for me.
I would just add that it's wonderful seeing all of the discussion around the Loch Ness, Milwaukee's Loch Ness monster. I think it was really wonderful to see folks in the community coming together to discuss their love of public art, or public facing art, one could say. I don't do social media, but I have had multiple folks come up to me and ask me about that. So I just wanted to note, I thought it was fun to see that conversation. All right, well, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
All right, is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye, all those opposed nay.
Aye.
Hi.
We are adjourned.